Welcome, everyone. If you have not heard of Kimball Gallagher, you are truly missing out. Hello, Kimball. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. I have prepared a couple of paragraphs to introduce you, and then we're going to play an excerpt from a TED Talk that you gave in 2015. So here it goes. Classically trained pianist, Juilliard graduate, Kimball reinvented the path of a traditional concert pianist. His approach to building his performing career was to launch 88 concert tour, reviving the salon culture. Such innovative and daring concept. The tour taken Kimball all around the globe, all 7 continents, including Antarctica, and 30 plus countries. And that includes countries like Afghanistan, India, and Tunisia. And I'm also going to read a brief sentence from his bio because it's so eloquently said about his geographic direction. So from Kennedy Center to Kabul, Bombay to Boulder, Chicago to Shanghai, Tuscany to Tunisia. The 88 concert tour concluded with a culmination recital by Gallagher at Carnegie Hall in 2015 in New York City, leading to the initiation of 88 international organization initiating and executing projects across the globe. Really phenomenal. Okay, so now we're going to play excerpt from his TED Talk. It's very important, I feel, before we go to Kimball and have him explain himself, because it really, he says it so well. So I just wanted to play an excerpt. Can we go there, please? Take a look.
That piece of music was written by this boy. His name is Elham. He was born in a country where music had been illegal, and he composed this piece while living in a war zone. This piece has now been heard by thousands of people in hundreds of places around the world, and it didn't happen through social media or mass broadcasting or large concert venues. To share with you how it happened, I have to go back to an earlier point in my career. This is Carnegie Hall, the mecca of classical music. I was trained as a classical pianist through my undergraduate in Rice University and my graduate degree at the Juilliard School here in New York. The conventional wisdom and thinking in those days involved building a career through participating in the many international, national, and local piano competitions. The hope was that a prize at one of these competitions would help launch a performing career that would include playing in a circuit of large concert venues or being engaged as a soloist with orchestra. Although I had some success with piano competitions in my early 20s, by my mid-20s, this was not the case, and I knew the conventional path wasn't going to work for me. So I had to find some new inspiration. Sometimes that can be found in history. I learned that most classical music that was written for piano and small ensembles, chamber music, was actually intended to be performed in small, intimate, private venues for a group of people that were part of the same social group. Friends, family, colleagues, etc. These kinds of concerts are sometimes called salon concerts. So when I played my first concert in a venue like this, a private home, the feeling of fulfillment was overwhelming to me. I could speak with the audience in between each musical selection and also after the concert one-on-one, share insights about the music, share ideas. These conversations formed a social connection and were very inspiring to both parties.
Wonderful. Okay. So now we're going to meet Kimball up close and personal. So how did this all start? Take us from the beginning. You being a little boy starting your I guess, piano lessons, and take us from there on. Go ahead.
Well, my first piano teacher was my father, so I grew up in the atmosphere of, you have to play this passage 10 times in a row without making a mistake, or else you can't leave the piano bench. And then if you get to the 10th time and you make a mistake on the second to last note, oh, too bad, you're back to zero. And then you got to do it again. So that was a little bit the vibe. I kind of quit piano when I was 10. I put up enough resistance. I took up electric guitar in my own room, because the piano is heard throughout the house, but actually the guitar was not. And then a few years after that, I started coming around to piano on my own. There was a friend of our family, a pianist named Joseph Smith, who was based in New York for many years until he sadly passed away in 2015. And he was a friend of both my parents for many decades. He's also a professional pianist, and he would hear me tinkering on the piano. And, I had enough of a level where I could sort of sight read clumsily through some Schubert sonatas and Schubert impromptus and things like that. And he heard me sort of scurrying around. He's like, you really have to, maybe you should find another teacher or do something. And he challenged me to make my own concert at the age of 15. And he sort of mentored me through this, but it was sort of a combination of him being my teacher, although he lived in New York and I was growing up in Boston, and also me being a little bit self-taught. And it was supposed to be, 10 people in our living room, like a salon concert actually, but it ended up being at this local piano store in the town that I grew up in, and about 70 or 80 people came, and I remember just being unbelievably nervous for this concert. It had a lot of music on it. It included, a few Chopin etudes, Beethoven sonata, some Debussy preludes, one or two of my own compositions, and that was sort of the first time that I was really kind of putting myself out there as a pianist at this age of 15. Joseph Smith's teacher, Seymour Bernstein, who became very well known in recent years because of a documentary made by Ethan Hawke called Seymour, An Introduction. He was actually Joseph Smith's teacher, and Joe Smith sent Seymour a tape of this recital that I had given at the age of 15, and Seymour helped me get arranged at New England Conservatory Pre-College with a teacher, Jonathan Bass, and that was in 1996, I believe. And so then from that point onward, I started to have a more, shall we say, typical musical upbringing with going to pre-college, having lessons once a week, participating in juries, etc. And in high school I went to this music program called Greenwood. And Greenwood is a wonderful place, focused primarily on chamber music, but I met so many other musicians there, and I met a teacher, Jeannie Kierman Fisher, who suggested I apply to Rice University. I ended up going to Rice University for my undergraduate.
Well, so wait a second, I have a question. So was there a point where you didn't know whether music was going to be your profession? I feel I have to ask that question because I think so many teens, especially nowadays, are not so sure about what to major in. Am I majoring in, computer science and music at the same time and doing double major just in case? But in your story, it seems like it was just a natural path to.
Well, it's funny you say that because actually in my freshman year of college, I did major in computer science and piano just in case. And, it was so challenging for me. I actually enjoyed computer science, but it quickly got, both piano and computer science, at least for me, it really depends on the type of student you are. I mean, they're both the kind of studies that you just have to put in as much time as it takes. And for me, if I get involved in a piano piece, I want to be practicing 3, 4, 5 hours a day. But really, computer science for me required very similar amounts of time. And I actually got a fairly bad case of tendonitis during my freshman year I think it was from being in the same position all the time, like sitting at a piano playing, and then you switch to sitting at a computer typing. And if you do this for hours and hours and hours every day, sleep deprived and stressed, you can have some accumulation. And I realized when I got the tendonitis, I realized I really had to make a choice. And it was really at that moment where I, at least from a standpoint of study, that, I wanted to be studying music without anything else involved. And that was sort of the definitive moment, I would say. Although prior to that, I definitely loved music, and I was eager to continue on that path in whatever way I could. But I would say it was a gradual process. It wasn't really a firm decision. And honestly, even now, I mean, I'm definitely on a path of music, but then as to, what are we actually going to concentrate on, that remains a question mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Rice University and then Juilliard, how did that happen?
Yes. I knew I always wanted to be in New York. I had grown up in Boston on the East Coast. I had visited New York a few times, and I knew I always wanted to be there. I kind of knew I didn't want to be there for undergraduate because it was just too overwhelming, too many things. I wanted to be able to focus just kind of on my own. And indeed, when I did move to New York, it was quite overwhelming in New York. Just so many interesting concerts and people all the time, and so many interesting distractions. But yeah, I had known some of the teachers at Juilliard by attending different summer music programs, and because of that, I had also met some of their students. So I kind of had some idea of who was there and sort of the vibe and everything. And I had a feeling I would have a shot at getting in. And so I remember doing these practice auditions. I had a group of friends at Rice, and in fact, all of us ended up going to Juilliard, 2 of them in cello, and we would do mock auditions for each other all the time. And we would try to make it as uncomfortable as we could because we were trying to simulate the actual audition environment. So we would try to do mock auditions when we were completely exhausted. We would make strange demands of each other, oh, can you play this passage without pedal? Can you do it again? And then we would, pretend to be the jury panel, and we'd make, remarks, sometimes impolite remarks, just to kind of simulate the environment. Can you maintain your concentration with all this stuff going on around you? So
right. And so tell us about your teachers at Juilliard, and then I guess your journey as a traditional concert pianist to be. And when did that switch occur in your head as to I have to do something else? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll say that when I was at Rice and even before, I was always somewhat entrepreneurial. I started teaching my own teaching studio. Even in high school, I had some of my own private students, and I saw that private teaching was and I was very interested in pedagogy and sort of the process and how do you sort of get from point A to point B in your piano playing. And when I was in Houston at Rice, I had my own piano studio, and I had a number of different jobs. And so when I went to Juilliard, I immediately started up my own piano studio. I was studying there with Robert McDonald. And let's see, I think the switch in my head was, it's kind of what the comment I made in the TED Talk. It was just this realization that everyone was just trying to do, roughly speaking, the same thing. I don't mean exactly the same thing. I mean, they were trying to follow roughly the same path, competitions. And then, I'd meet these pianists that had won, they were winners of 10, 15 competitions, and their lives kind of still revolved around doing competitions. And I saw that, competitions, being successful in competitions might lead to being more successful in competitions. And of course, there's exceptions to this. And there's people who've managed to form, wonderful careers. But every time I would apply for a competition, I never really felt particularly excited. And I remember this one time I decided I'm really going to try. I applied to something like 10 or 15 competitions, and I got into a few of them, but they didn't work out. And then at the same time, I had a mentor. He started his own concert series in his home, and he asked me to be the first performer at it. This is actually back in Houston, and I kind of always had that in the back of my mind. Like, I have a feeling there's more possibilities here. I was only thinking about the U.S. at that point, but there's just so many homes that have pianos that aren't really necessarily used. This is in 2002. It's a little different now. Internet hadn't, the internet existed, of course, but it wasn't super. We didn't have numerous platforms for all this crowdfunding and numerous platforms now for salon concerts. But in those days, about 20 years ago, this seemed like not exactly a new idea, but just something that there was a lot of unexplored territory. And so I started thinking of homes I'd walk into somebody's house and I would just see, oh, I think you could have a concert here. You have a piano and people could sit here and this could fit about 15 people or 20 people or 40 people. And I just started asking around, and it started off just very naturally, very casually. And then when I graduated Juilliard, I actually had a related project dividing the cost of a piano by 88 and asking for donations on a key by key basis, because I didn't have my own piano, and then when I graduated, I didn't have access to the practice rooms anymore. So of course, you at some point, pianist needs to have their own piano, so I did this 88 key fundraiser, and that was also part of this switch in my head, I would say, because I kind of, decided, I'm going to make a project out of this, and I learned so much trying to do this fundraiser on my own, how to create sort of a timeline, how to invite people to participate in that. I remember talking to so many people about these ideas. I'm going to divide the cost by 88. I'm going to ask for donations on a key by key basis. And different people would give me different ideas, like, oh, you should go talk to this person. Maybe they'll host the concert for you there. And I met the people at Faust Harrison Pianos, and Michael Harrison suggested, why don't you do the concert at the store? And then later I had some friends that suggested, you can have different categories where people can, you can have different categories on your pledge card, one key, trill, major third, perfect fifth, glissando club, crescendo club. It just, cutesy. It was kind of cutesy, but it was fun. It made it fun.
Worked.
Yeah. And it took about maybe a year and a half or so, but that process worked. I had about 50 or 60 people who ended up paying for this piano, which I still have and I still practice on all the time. And so then when it came to the salon concerts, I thought, well, this idea of the 88 keys as a theme, it kind of worked for the piano. Let's try to do an 88 concert tour where the focus would be salon concerts. And it turned out, I found a few concerts in the United States and all over the US actually. But then little by little, it started becoming international. And then, if somebody would invite me to a certain part of the world or part of the country, naturally they would say, oh, well, you should visit, my cousin's school or my son's school or whatever. They want you to do an educational program. And then sometimes they'd be recommending all different types of venues. So it wasn't strictly limited only to salon concerts, but that was the intention. And so even if I would play at a school or another venue, I would still have this sort of conversational aspect to the concerts. And that's something that allowed me to really meet people after each concert. And it was those people who really helped me to find the next concerts. And that's really how this ended up taking me all over the world, really just one step at a time.
Can I just intervene with one question? So before you started going around the world, what was your repertoire like?
Sure. I mean, I would say it was fairly conventional. I was, of course, very interested in romantic music, so I almost always had some Chopin on my programs. Trying to think exactly what I played in those. I remember playing a lot of Chopin, typical stuff, classical sonata, romantic piece. I also would always compose a piece. That's something Seymour Bernstein told me when I was like 15. He said, every time you play a concert, you must play one of your own compositions. So I didn't do that every single concert, but what I did for the salon concerts is that typically it would be the host. I would write a piece dedicated to the host, but I would use the name or names, if it was a couple or a family, I would use the names of the hosts, translate it into musical notes, and then use those musical notes. You know how Bach used to spell his name in musical notes, B-A-C-H, and then those four notes formed like a musical motif, and then he would use that musical material to create the composition. So that's what I did with the hosts' names. And so I would often, sometimes if I didn't have time to compose something, I would try to do like a very short improvisation that I would sort of prepare. And this was a way to not only include one of my own works, but also kind of try to find interesting ways of connecting with the host or the audience. And I had some friends that were composers, and from time to time I'd put their pieces on the program as well. So it was, I would say, a fairly conventional approach with a few kind of special touches added in.
And so when was it that you were invited to India And because you were going on tour of India, you then basically asked, I think it's correct information, you tell me if I'm wrong, you asked Michael Harrison to write a Jampuri, which is a traditional Indian, I guess, structure of a piece, and you can tell us more about it. And you played it throughout the tour of India, along with your other, along with your other repertoire. So tell us more about that, because we're going to play that we also have a video of.
Exactly. Actually, the way I love to explain it is through this notion of doing salon concerts. Salon concerts for me meant that I would make, as an artist, I would make an effort to connect the program or my comments or something to the place that I was playing. That could be a connection to the host. It could be a connection to the year the house was built. It could be any number of connections. And of course, when you go into other countries or other cultures, then the connection can be exploring different musical genres, different musical languages. And so when the tour of India did come up, I wanted to explore a little bit, at least, Indian classical music, not to become, a master of Indian classical music, but just to sort of dip my toes in the water. And since I had already worked with Michael Harrison with the 88 Key fundraiser, and I knew that he was involved in Indian music, it was just sort of a natural thing. Hey, Michael, I'm going to be going to India next, in the coming months or something. Can you help me understand a little bit about Indian classical music? And so he had already written I think some compositions for piano that were specifically, written with reference to Indian classical music. And of course, piano is not normally a part of Indian classical music, and so you really need a composer. He seemed very well placed, Michael did, to compose a piece in an Indian classical music style using the piano, because he has a deep understanding of the piano and also of Indian classical music. And so, yes, I did. I asked him if he would compose something for this purpose, and Jampuri was the composition. And I guess Jampuri is a raga or a rag, and so that just means it's he would explain it much better than I would, but it's essentially a scale. But not only does the scale contain the notes that you need to use, but it also has certain melodic patterns that would always occur, if that makes any sense. So it implies certain melodies as well as just the notes themselves.
And so the recording that we have, there is a piano, voice, and tell us what other instruments are there.
Sure. So one thing Michael did is that he made the piece, there's a solo piano version, which I've also played many, many times, so you could play it no matter what. And then there's a version for piano and tabla, and then there's another version for piano, tabla, and voice. And so he made these three versions. And there's also the tambora, which is like a drone type instrument. And the drone type instrument, it's just a steady drone throughout the entire piece. Sometimes in Indian classical music, we use like a box for the drone in case you don't have the actual instrument. It's like a electronic drone, essentially. So sometimes it'll have that. In this particular recording, I believe there's a tambora live. So we have the tabla, the tambora, and the voice and piano.
So let's play a little excerpt of that. Beautiful. I love it. Even though I never heard Jampuri before, I had looked into your files, but I instantly loved it. And so your journey then of really like a globe trekker, like Marco Polo of classical music. That's what I'm just thinking about you. And so but interesting what you said when we met, before today, a few days ago, you said that the world of classical music that we know as Westerners is very, very small. And you're absolutely right about that. And there is so much, different musical culture that's going on outside of the Western music that you basically embraced, with your journey, as far as also not only performing as a performing artist, but also as far as your educational approach to teaching kids. You said very interestingly, you said it's not about teaching this kid how to necessarily, trill with a third and fourth finger on a piano, but rather, what is it that you like to do? Tell us more about kind of both. So let me rephrase it in a shorter way. So embracing musical cultures of the rest of the world, and also your approach to education of the kids that you come across in all different parts of the world. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I had these sort of different ways of thinking, or different phases that I went through, and I was trying in the salon concerts to be, my intention was to be very focused on the audience, to try to centralize the audience and the experience. And I did that by always trying to have conversations with them, trying to receive questions, trying to orient my comments and also the content of the concert towards what I thought or what I imagined to be something that could be easily digested by the audience. And so I would change the way I spoke depending on to whom I was speaking, etc. But then in these travels, and I'll take Tunisia as an example, a country where I played many concerts in a very conventional way of classical music, but I also managed to teach a lot of students there. And I came to realize that, what was really, we can offer the things that we're used to offering. So for example, I was used to giving private piano lessons, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever the case may be, working on primarily standard classical music repertoire. And that was one thing that I could do. But then I started realizing that there's so much talent. There was so much talent in, for example, Tunisia. And so much of it, there wasn't really enough teachers to go around. There's so many students that have talent, but their parents didn't really have the funds necessarily to allow them to have these lessons in the conventional sense. And I started asking the question, how could I reach, or how could I create a project or a program that would reach, thousands of students rather than just the number that I personally could teach in a week? And I came to have the conviction that a lot of it has to do with just general music education. What could a general music education be that could also address some of the needs of well, I don't want to say the culture, but of the society, let's say. And how can music meet needs of society? Because in sort of the classical music world that we know as Westerners, as you were saying, it's also a small world. I don't really have the words to describe it very clearly, but it's like the people who are already interested in classical music, and it's like, how do you get new people to come into it? And there's this need to grow more and more audience. But what I saw in Tunisia was incredible amounts of natural talent and almost no cultivation of this talent at all. And I just saw that the missing piece was something having to do with a general music education. But I also saw that the teachers there were not really so open to these ideas. They were not open, for example, to the ideas of the students creating their own music. But I saw that asking people to write their own music or write their own songs, for example, was a much faster way. It was a much more immediate way for students of any age to participate in music and just be active in music and do something meaningful for them in music. And I understood that if they created their own songs, they could a lot of times do this without really a teacher, or certainly without the conventional setup of like a lesson a week and your recital and all this kind of thing. And so I started to design this program called Tunisia 88, which is a program to have music clubs in schools. And this was a concept that already existed. Yes, go ahead, please.
1 second. So I'm reading from your portfolio. You have student-centered after-school program in all 585 public high schools. Let me say that again. 585 public high schools. How many students is that? My gosh.
Well, each club has a different number of students. There are some clubs that have just 3 or 4 students in them, and then there's other clubs that have like 30. So it really depends on the school. I would say the average number is roughly 5, or maybe between 5 and 10 somewhere. Let's say 7 is the average. There's some big ones, there's some small ones. Yeah.
It's still, hundreds of students basically.
Thousands of students. There's about 5,000 total students that are in these different clubs around the country in the schools. And
so who is teaching those? Who is teaching those clubs?
Well, as I kind of indicated, this model is student-centered, and there isn't necessarily a teacher. This is built on the conviction that in Tunisia there's so much raw talent that's unused, unchanneled. And so what we do is ask the students to be the leaders of their clubs. And so we provide what we call a leadership. We have like sort of a leadership training cycle, and it includes also what we call creativity training, which is kind of like a compositional songwriting training. And it's involved, the songwriting is really involved in what is the message, what is the message that you want to share as a student, as a teenager, as an adolescent. What do you want to share? What's important for you in your club to share? And then using the resources that the club already has. If you pull, random teenagers who are somewhat interested in music, you'll find most of them have some hidden talent that isn't being used, or they have some instrument that they know how to play a little bit, but it's enough. It's enough. It might not be enough to become, to go to the Juilliard school, but it's enough to write your own song and perform it in front of people. And so the students are asked to be their own leaders. The students actually elect their own leader from amongst themselves, and the clubs have guidance in the form of mentors. They have guidance in the form of actually some alumni of the program who are just a few years older than these high school students. They also follow the clubs and give guidance, and so it's more that style, having mentorship rather than a teacher in the classic sense. And this program is not aiming to fill the same space that a conventional music lessons would fill. This is aiming to be a more general music education, to give people the possibility of participating in music. And a small subset of those who participate in our program will choose and have chosen to go a more conventional route as well into the conservatory and sort of deepen their studies. But this allows many, many people to become involved, in music in their own ways.
We are actually going to now go into a picture gallery, and as we show each picture, talk about what it means.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So this is just the recent tour. Montreal, France, Spain, Luxembourg, New York. We were promoting Tunisia 88 outside of Tunisia. So that's what this was all about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is Carnegie Hall with the Jean Pori. The first piece of the concert was Jean Pori.
I was there.
Oh, fantastic. I need to do another one. This is also Carnegie Hall. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is just a headshot. Not much else to say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a recent concert in Tunis, actually, with Tunisia 88 Choir and Concerto Malaga, a group from Malaga, Spain, that came to Tunisia. And this is actually a performance of a piece called Soto Guitar, which is Voices of Birds. Voices of Birds is a sort of a nomadic song from the south of Tunisia, which I kind of took it and I arranged it for choir, string orchestra, and piano. and we played it here. I wanted to have something I could do in collaboration with the youth choir of Tunisia 88 that was not a Western piece, but was rather a Tunisian piece. This is also that. The conductor, who you saw in the previous image, was actually also a soprano soloist in the piece. So at one point she turns around and she changes role from conductor to soloist for about 32 measures, and then she turns around again and keeps conducting. So we thought that would be sort of a fun thing to do. And that section where she has the solo is just for strings and piano, so there isn't a choir part happening. So it's okay if she neglects the choir for a little bit while she has her own solo. Also a headshot. This is after a Tunisia 88 concert in Turkey, in Gebze, Turkey. This is also including the Taipei Civic Symphony Orchestra, which is a group from Taipei, from Taiwan, who came not only to Tunisia to collaborate with Tunisia 88, but also to Lebanon and Turkey to collaborate with Tunisia 88. Taiwan is also a place where there's a project called Taiwan 88, which went to over 100 schools in Taiwan. And we continue to have also collaborations between Taiwan and Tunisia. And this is just a random beach concert given by a Tunisia 88 club, and I just happened to visit the concert, and then I was about to leave, and they said, "Hey, we got to take a photo with you." So we gathered a few of the club members. These are all Tunisia 88 club members that participated in that concert. And this is another aspect. These are from Myanmar, the country of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, or currently also known as Burma, in Southeast Asia. And well, until this year, until 2021, we've run a music festival there since 2014, 7 consecutive years. This year is the first year we didn't do anything because, unfortunately, there was a coup d'etat on February 1st, and so we're not sure exactly where to go. But this image shows the...
What does that mean? I'm sorry.
The coup d'etat?
Yeah.
It means that it means that a group forcibly takes over the government. In this case, the military of Myanmar took over the current government. Yeah. So because of that, there's been just intense political unrest combined with a lot of violence and a lot of... I can't even go to Myanmar now. No one can get in. They've sort of closed it down for non-citizens. But this image shows before a concert, you'll see Myanmar musicians. These are members of our Myanmar Choir. There's a group from Malaysia in here. There's a group... there's members coming from all over Myanmar. And so this is another one of our another one of 88 International's projects, Myanmar Music Festival. Yeah.
And tell us about the Joseph Smith piano.
Sure. So Joseph Smith was my mentor, as I mentioned earlier. He passed away in 2015, and we decided to donate his piano to a school in Myanmar called the Kaye International School. And they are not only the partner of the music festival that you see, well, this is an image from one of the years of the festival, but at this school they also have a music department called the Joseph Smith Music Center, which we launched when we gave them this piano. And that was going fairly well for several years. We had music classes at the school that were pretty, I think, pretty high quality, this is more in early childhood and elementary school. But also we had some private lessons on Joseph Smith's piano, both for piano and violin. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens with that in the coming years. I'm not sure how that's going to go.
So tell us more about, so we can move away from this picture. Tell us now more about Taiwan and the violin program. So in Taiwan, it says your Taiwan 88 reached over 20,000 students in over 80 schools. And tell us about the violin program there.
So there's in Taiwan, in the center of Taiwan, in an Aboriginal village called Chinai Village, there are some teachers, and I'm trying to remember the teacher's name. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name. It's been a couple of years, but they make their own violins, and they've taught members of this school and the village to make violins. And as a result, we had a program we did a series of fundraisers to buy a number of these violins, which we then donated. So we took about 45 violins and gave of different sizes. So this is meant for educational purposes. So we have all different sizes of the violins, and we gave that to Joseph Smith Music Center in Myanmar, and a few other music schools in Myanmar as well. We gave a number of other violins to a program in Chile, and we gave another set of violins to a program in Tunisia, and another set of violins to a program in Thailand. And so our idea was just to highlight this village, which is extraordinary in Taiwan. It's a very rural mountain village, and it's just very unusual type of scenario where you find, I wish I had a photo of it, but you find this amazing violin workshop basically in the middle of the mountains, and they make these very beautiful Aboriginal designs on them, and that those violins could also be used in scenarios, where they couldn't easily find violins for educational purposes, was the point of the program. And it's still going on. The violins are still being used. We're still trying to track how they're being used and everything like that.
Great. And so is a program in Taiwan, we have a great picture. Can we find this picture, or is it just exist on this document with sea of kids?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, so tell us about this. My gosh.
This is one of the Taiwan 88 concerts. We went around to mostly elementary schools, but we just found that in Taiwan there was a big appetite for quality classical music, interactive classical music concerts for kids. And so we designed a program, very interactive, including a lot of activities to try to keep the kids very alert and engaged with the different aspects of the music. And a lot of the elementary schools would choose to have the concert in their gymnasium like this, so they could have the maximum number of kids. And so it was really quite a thrill, because we'd just go from school to school, and it was like playing for thousands of kids in each school. And in Taiwan, they're extremely well organized. So if you tell them the concert's going to be at 10 a.m., you can show up at 9:55, and there's still plenty of time to get ready, because the organization is so good. So this is just one of our favorite pictures from that tour.
And so what do you play? Meaning, like, what is on your agenda for that concert?
So we first thing we do is start off and ask for volunteers, because we want to make it interactive as possible. So we start by doing an improvisation game. We ask kids to play. So I would play something very simple on the piano, like one note or two notes, just almost randomly, and then they're supposed to repeat that same thing, but also change it a little bit. And then the other person, it's like four hands, right? So if I play something simple and then you play something that's almost the same but you change it, then I'm going to listen to what you did and play something almost the same but change it. And we just go back and forth. And we do this with 3 or 4 kids, and that kind of sets the tone. Then we always played this pieces from Bizet games, Jeux d'enfants, children's games. There's a set of 12 pieces for 4 hands. And then we asked them to guess, because each of the pieces of music is named after a children's game. There's the spinning top, there's the swing, there's soap bubbles, there's march, there's hide and go seek, there's many others. I can't list them all, but we had that set of pieces. We played almost every single concert. We also I wrote a few children's games myself. We commissioned a few Taiwanese composers to write some children's games, so we included that in the mix. So that was a lot of fun. I also played the piece by Elham from Afghanistan. We would spell children's names out in musical notes and allow them to decide what kind of atmosphere would they like. We played some forehand typical, I'd play movements from pictures at an exhibition, but they would have to they would have to choose which painting they wanted to hear. So we would show them the paintings, and then there'd be a vote. There'd be some kind of activity linked to the piece that was meant to incite the students to listen, whether it was clapping, singing, voting, quiz, some kind of always activity.
So having that many kids in the what is it, gym or auditorium, it's almost like a rock concert. How do
yeah, exactly.
So how do you control them not yelling or screaming or is that not an issue?
Well, I mean, luckily we have microphones, so no matter how loud they get, we're always louder than they are. And in that type of setting, sometimes we'd play in an auditorium where it was a bit more designed for this type of activity. But yeah, I mean, just like any school, the principal gets up in front of the kids before and asks them to please, behave themselves well and listen carefully and cooperate with our guests, and then we're the guests. So every now and then we ask them to be quiet, and they usually calm down, and then they get excited again, and you ask them to be quiet, just like any group of kids, really.
So I know this is not necessarily in your portfolio that you sent, but I want to hear about your trip to Antarctica. You kind of do say a little bit about that in your TED Talk, and I think it's fascinating because who has been there and played a concert? I don't know anybody else but you. So tell us about the concert or the event that you had in Antarctica. I think it's so incredible. Go ahead.
Sure. I had been to 6 continents, and a friend of mine challenged me and said, you got to go to all the continents. You can't just leave this one. And he had actually been to a place in Antarctica on an island called King George Island, and it's at the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. And he told me, there's like a group of people in Chile that go back and forth between Chile, the southern tip of Chile, the city Punta Arenas, and this island, King George Island. And it turns out on this island there are 4 scientific research stations. There's the Chilean one, there's also a Chinese, a Russian, and a Uruguayan research station, and they're all within walking distance of each other. In fact, the Chilean and Russian are right next door. It's like a 10-second walk, and the Chinese one is just sort of over this hill, and the Uruguayan one is over another hill. So I went to Punta Arenas, and I was trying to ask this airline called DAP, if they would support the concert. And I was going into their office, every morning and trying to get a meeting with the owner of the airline so I could explain why I wanted to go to Antarctica, why I wanted to play the concert. And I had gotten to know the Chilean Institute, the Chilean Antarctic Institute, because they're the ones that ran the research station. And I asked them, can you please host a concert for me? And I explained the 88 concert tour. I explained, the story of Elham and how I had been to Afghanistan and been to, all these other countries, and I wanted to go to the 7th continent, Antarctica, and could we please invite, scientists from these research stations? Anyway, eventually it came together, and I took a flight there in the morning. I came back in the evening. We couldn't stay overnight. I was there for about 5 hours. The concert was, it had to be on an electric piano, unfortunately, but I figured out that in order to bring an acoustic piano, I would have needed 2 years of lead time and about $50,000 to transport it, with all told. So I decided it was good enough on a keyboard, took the flight down. It was a nice day, and we had about 30 scientists from these different research stations come to the Chilean station, and I played through my program. I dedicated the prelude to a man named Alejo Contreras. He was the first Chilean in his, I forget what it is. He had walked to the South Pole. He was like one of the only people in history to actually walk to the South Pole from the edge of Antarctica to the South Pole. And he's a logistics manager for this airline. So he helped me out a lot. And so I dedicated a piece of music to him, spelling his name in musical notes. And he's kind of an adventurer, Antarctic adventurer. And that's pretty much the story. It was really a story of insisting because I was in Punta Arenas and I had to show up and bug all these poor people every single day. Like, they got sick of seeing me, but they knew I wouldn't go away until we actually made the concert. So eventually it happened. There's another cool thing that happened there was I got to know the cultural department that was based in Punta Arenas, and they had me for a concert at a university there, and I played the Liszt Sonata. And it so happened there was a Chilean doctor there whose wife was Hungarian, and he was the honorary, the honorary Hungarian consulate in Punta Arenas. So when he heard the Liszt piece, he came up to me after the concert and he said, "Oh, I am the Hungarian consulate." And he got kind of excited, and he tried to help me also. And he ended up setting up another concert that was hosted by the honorary Hungarian consulate, featuring the Liszt Sonata again. And he was able to have me go, on the news and get a little bit of publicity, connecting the Hungarian consulate with this concert in Antarctica. And that was one of the things that helped kind of consolidate this whole effort.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
fantastic story. And I'd like to play another selection that we have, that you have created, this choir, right? Where children are singing "Ode to Joy," and they're singing it first in German, and then they're singing it in their own language. Let's play that first, and then you can tell us how it all came about.
Schöne Güte Funken, Tochter Elysium, wir betreten Feuer trunken, himmlischer dein Heiligtum, deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Modas ragete, alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Fliege weicht.
Beautiful. So to me, this is, a really important message of peace and friendship, and being united. So tell us more as to how this idea. Why Ode to Joy? Go ahead.
Sure. Well, this was for the Myanmar Music Festival 2020. So this is before there was this coup, and so things were still relatively okay in Myanmar during COVID, though. So we had to do our 7th season online, and we decided to do Ode to Joy because it was Beethoven's 250th anniversary. And so we also selected a piece by a Burmese composer named Mamya Le, and she was a composer at the same time as Beethoven. And so we wanted to compare, let's take a few works of Beethoven and a few of her works and try to make the 250th anniversary of Beethoven meaningful in Myanmar as well. And because we have our Myanmar Choir, which consists of members from all over Myanmar, they all learned Ode to Joy, this adaptation we made. We've shortened it a bit. The soloists are coming from Malaysia, with the exception of the first soloist, the baritone. He's coming from Myanmar. And this was an online project, actually, so that's what it's all about. But then, of course, we didn't want to do the entire thing in German because, again, we were trying to make this as, meaningful as possible in Burmese. And in Myanmar, peace is internal to Myanmar, peace is a major issue. Even at that time, now it's gotten much worse, but at that time, you have all these different ethnic groups and lots of ongoing conflict and civil war between different groups within Myanmar. And this has been going on for, a century at least. Many, I can't even get into all the history of it, but we were always looking for ways to encourage the peace process inside Myanmar. And so we thought this would be appropriate.
Fantastic. Well, I don't know, is there anything else you'd like to add? We are coming to a close of our feature of Kimball Gallagher. Anything you'd like to say to the audience watching, or any fellow musicians? Anything, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed this. I think we've sort of touched on a number of different elements that have been important, to me in my kind of path, and yeah, I mean, I found it to be possible to both be sort of a pianist in the more typical sense of the word, where you get ready for concerts and play classical music repertoire, but also be kind of a producer and a sort of have a vision for how music and what music can be in various other countries and contexts, and to try to make it meaningful. And I feel like we've touched on a lot of those elements. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us. We wish everyone a fantastic holiday season and a happy new year, and hope that the new year brings lots of opportunities for you all, especially to those who are performing live, as we all miss live
Absolutely.
concerts and going to live concerts. So we really am crossing my fingers for all the performers that we can hear you all much more often in 2022. We wish you all very best, and thank you to Kimball for joining us today. Bye-bye.